Unnecessary roughness, more like unnecessary buffness. 7 reasons why the push-up is the muscle building GOAT. What's up guys, Matt Dasher from Blue Star Nutraceuticals. I'm here on the floor of the Blue Star Nutraceuticals training facility, and today I'm gonna go over one of the best all-time muscle building exercises, the push-up. I got 7 amazing points to show you guys of how that you can use this exercise to maximize your muscle gains. Now, without further ado, why don't we just get straight into it? All right guys, so point number 1 is that we get multiple muscles being activated with a push-up, okay? So the push-up is one of the quintessential compound movements, especially when it comes to body weight movements, because it allows us to target so many muscle groups at once. Not only is this gonna allow you to generate tons of muscular development, but it's also gonna help us to generate more anabolic hormones. So a lot of times when we're stressing a lot of muscle groups at once, our body is gonna amp up the production of these anabolic hormones because we're stressing so many things. Remember, the body doesn't know that you're trying to work out, the body thinks you're fighting for your life. And if it thinks that you're too challenged, that you're having a hard time doing it, it's gonna crank up these anabolic hormones so that you can become stronger every single time. Now, with each one of these points, guys, I wanna go over a different push-up variation just to make it fun for you. And where would I be without starting with the quintessential variation, the straight up simple push-up? Now, I'm gonna go over a couple pointers as to how to do it right and what I typically see people doing push-ups wrong. Or what I consider to be wrong anyways, but a lot of times when I see people doing push-ups, they get their hand position off, okay? So one of the things to keep in mind here is that we wanna have a stable shoulder joint and we wanna have a good stable position throughout our entire kinetic chain. So I don't wanna see people doing push-ups with their arms at 90 degrees, and I don't wanna see people doing push-ups with their ass up in the air like they're cat in heat. That's not gonna be good for your lower back. This ain't gonna be good for your shoulders. Remember, this is a total body exercise, so we wanna make sure that we have tension throughout the entire kinetic chain. Now, again, what I was talking about, guys, is a lot of times people would be doing push-ups with their arms at about a 90-degree angle like this. That's not gonna be ideal for the shoulder joint, okay? We're gonna put a ton of stress on the AC joint here. You might feel a great stretch in the pecs, and hey, that's great, but it's not great if it's gonna cost you gains in the long run due to injury. So what I like to think about is, instead of having my body set up in a T, I like to have my body set up a little bit more like an arrowhead. So my hands are gonna be here and here, my head's here, obviously feet are down at the bottom, hopefully. So I'm gonna keep my hands more in line with probably around my mid-chest. So think about if I was doing bench press where my low point would be, I'm gonna have that kind of positioning, only my palms are gonna be open instead. Now from here, I wanna think about having a neutral spine. So what do I mean by that? This is not a neutral spine. If my butt's up in the air like that, I'm putting a lot of pressure on my lower lumbar vertebrae or my low back, and I'm cranking my hip flexors as well. So I like to squeeze the butt cheek so that I can rotate my pelvis through a little bit. Now I'm engaging my core. So now from heel all the way up to head, I've got tension through my entire kinetic chain because I'm squeezing my quads, squeezing my butt cheeks, squeezing my core, and I'm gonna be gripping the ground like it owes me money. As I come down, I wanna think about my arms being about 45-degree angle to my torso. So I'm gonna come down like this, squeezing my shoulder blades kind of in that down and back position or tucking them into my back pockets, and I'm gonna drive up. As I come up, unlike the bench press, if I want, I can kind of do a little push-up plus. Sometimes they call that a push-up plus where they push through, because that's gonna activate some more shoulder stabilizers. So again, full range of motion all the way down. At the bottom, my chin should be hitting the ground right around the same time my midsection does. So if you're getting to the bottom and your face is towards hitting the ground, but your butt's still up in the air, you're not doing it right. If your crotch is hitting the ground and your chin's still way up off the ground, you're not doing it right. So make sure that we start basically in a position that's gonna allow us to hit the ground all the way through level from top to bottom, okay? If you're having a hard time getting that, and I have had it with people where they have a really hard time getting in the right position, you can always start from the ground up too. So if I start here, drive those shoulders down, push up, and just maintain tension, chances are when I come down for my next rep, I'm gonna be in the perfect position. Point number 2 is the progressive overload principle. So one of the great things about push-ups is there's a ton of different variations you can do that will be able to allow you to align up your strength or your physical capacity with the variation so that you can continue to make this exercise tougher and tougher for you as you go. So again, as I mentioned before, it's one of the quintessential muscle builders because we're hitting every muscle in the body. Some muscle groups are gonna be a little bit weaker than others, and some are gonna take time to get a little bit more developed. So even though we're hitting the chest, the shoulders, the triceps, the core, everything with this exercise, sometimes we're just not strong enough to pull off a proper push-up. That's okay, we can regress it just like we can regress any other exercise. So my first variation is going to be one that's a little bit simpler, but a lot of people mess this up, and if you're doing it the wrong way, it's not gonna help you to get to a better variation of a push-up. So I'm gonna show you how to do this the right way so you can get the most gains possible from it. So if we were to do a push-up variation regressed from the original, then we're probably gonna do it from the knees on the ground. Now, the main thing that I see people doing wrong with this, they don't have great joint alignment, which means they're gonna allow their pelvis to dump forward and their butt's gonna be sticking way up in the air. You might be able to get away from this for a little while, but over time, this is really gonna hurt your lower back and it's gonna cut out the core muscles. One of the best things about push-ups is that it's cranking the core, all right? If you guys want that 6-pack, that 8-pack, if you want those obliques to start popping, you gotta work the core. This muscle group's gonna get smoked if you're doing push-ups properly. If you're doing them improperly, you're cutting that out. The other thing that I see a lot of times people doing from this knee variation is that they just allow the shoulders to dump forward like that. An injured athlete can't get better. We want to work the shoulders, but we don't want to smash the shoulders. So we want to make sure that we're getting our pelvis in the right position, and we want to make sure that we're getting our shoulders in the right position as we're doing this. So the big thing to think about in our start position as we're going to do this regressed variation is aligning the pelvis. So I'm going to think about pulling my pubic bone up towards my rib cage by activating the core, squeezing the butt cheeks. Again, total body exercise, guys. So instead of being like this, just going to rotate that through. You'll feel your core engage right away. This is basically like a dynamic plank. If you're doing this right, you should feel the core engage the same as you would a plank. The next thing is as I'm going down for the rep, I just want to remember to pull those shoulder blades, guess where? Down and back, okay? So instead of coming down like this, I'm gonna draw the shoulder blades down and back into my back pockets, maintaining that tension on the core, maintaining the tension on the glutes, and then driving back up from there. A simpler variation than the original, but sometimes people have a hard time doing proper push-ups with a normal variation. Sometimes you have to regress to progress, guys, and doing this variation properly will be critical to helping you generate more muscle and helping you to get to the more advanced variations. Our next point here, one of the reasons that the push-up is one of the greatest muscle building exercises of all time is because you can increase your motor unit recruitment. So what does that mean? Motor unit recruitment means that we're going to be able to activate more of the muscle that we have because we get a greater signal from the brain. So I've talked about this in other videos, but the analogy that I really love is to think of the brain as the amplifier and the muscles as the speaker. And the more signal you can get from the amplifier to the speaker, the more activation you're gonna get out of that speaker, the more volume, the better sound, or in this case, the more power. So if we're talking about activating more muscle, then we're gonna be using variations that allow us to enhance the signal. So that's gonna be variations that are going to be a little bit harder for us, or potentially one-arm push-ups, that kind of thing, or a variation that's gonna be more explosive, like a plyometric push-up. Now, plyometric push-ups shouldn't be done until you've dialed in the original form of the original push-up really well. So my next variation for you is the plyometric push-up. Plyometric just means explosive. So I'm gonna be bringing my body down under control. I'm gonna be exploding through the concentric part of this movement, trying to launch myself off the ground. If I'm going up high enough, I can clap. I don't have to clap though. I just want my hands to leave the ground. I want to be explosive. As I come down, I'm catching myself under control and going back into the next rep. You don't need to do this for super high reps, guys. If you can stick in the 8 to 10 rep range for this, you're gonna get maximum benefit from that. The setup for this is gonna be the exact same as the original push-up variation. We want lots of rigidity through the core. We want the glutes turned on. The shoulder blades are gonna be set, and we wanna make sure that we're hitting all muscle groups here, all right, guys? Now, my claps left a little bit to be desired there, but you know, I just didn't wanna hit my hands together so hard that it disturbed everyone else in the gym. But in reality, that's the kind of energy that you wanna pump out there. You wanna make sure you're exploding off the ground as hard as possible. Again, what we're trying to do is increase the magnitude of the response from the CNS to the tissues, all right? So remember that. We're gonna use different variations of push-ups to increase the magnitude of response from our tissues, and we're gonna get more power out of the body by doing that. All right, guys, the next point here is that push-ups, when done correctly, can generate a higher hormonal response. So it's gonna help our body to pump out a lot more anabolic hormones. So remember what I said earlier is that our body doesn't know that we're training, our body thinks we're fighting for survival. And if we make the body challenged enough, if we challenge the body enough through different variations, different types of drop sets, then we can increase or encourage that anabolic response because the body thinks, hey man, I gotta survive another one of these. I'm gonna jack up anabolic hormones to make sure that I'm bigger and stronger next time I have to face this challenge. So my variation for you here is going to be a tricep push-up, but I'm gonna do this in a format that allows you to really kind of tap into that hormonal response in the body by doing what I call a mechanical drop set. So we're gonna use a few different variations of push-ups. We're gonna start with the hardest variation, and then we're gonna move down towards the easiest variation so that we can really challenge the body and trigger the body to jack up testosterone production, jack up human growth hormone production by essentially making our body feel threatened, like we're not gonna survive if we don't get stronger, okay? So My next first variation here is going to be a diamond push-up. So this is going to be a tricep dominant variation. I'm gonna be putting my hands into this kind of diamond shape as I'm doing it. By having my hands closer together, I'm gonna put less emphasis on the pecs and more emphasis on the triceps. This is an amazing tricep builder here, guys, but if you're not really strong enough for this variation, wait on it until you are, because it's gonna put a lot of stress on the elbows. Everything else stays the same. I still want maximum tension from toes all the way up to my head. Only here, because my hands are in closer, I'm gonna be bending mostly at the elbow joint. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do about 8 to 10 reps of this variation. Then I'm gonna do my plyometric push-up variation. Then I'm gonna do my normal push-up variation. Then I'm gonna do my second variation, which was the regressed variation. So I'm gonna use all of these now in one big mechanical drop set to show you how you can use this to increase hormonal response. Now again, keeping tension throughout the whole body. I wanna make sure I get a full lockout here, because this is a more tricep dominant variation. The triceps respond really well to being locked out, so you can get a good peak contraction. And I'm gonna go into my plyometric variation. Getting more fatigued, so now I'm gonna drop down to my normal push-ups. And then as these get really hard, guys, I'm gonna take it one step further, make them a little bit easier. I'm gonna take this to failure. And there you have it, the perfect push-up recipe for increased hormonal response. Now you can do this with a ton of different variations, guys. The idea with a mechanical drop set is you're just gonna go from a harder variation to a progressively easier variation until you can't do's no more. And if you do that, challenge the body enough, it'll crank up that hormonal response. Oh, that was a little bit tougher than I anticipated. That was good. Still got some good hang time on those plyos though. I don't know if you caught that. All right, thanks. I pay him to say that. All right, guys, so the next reason why the push-up is one of the greatest muscle building exercises of all time is because of activation of stabilizer muscles. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait a second, we're on the ground. What do we have to stabilize? Well, this is where variations come in. One of the things that I really like about push-ups is the fact that there are hundreds of variations, and if you use them properly, you get all sorts of benefits. Today, I'm gonna do a side-to-side push-up variation using a med ball. Now, you can do this variation with a kettlebell. You can do this variation with a stack of books if you want. It's not necessarily this thing that's gonna challenge the stabilizer so much as the movement, the fact that it's dynamic, we're moving from side to side. Now, I'm gonna show you a side-to-side push-up, but you can also play around with lifting up your legs or changing your hand positioning, any of that stuff. But in reality, guys, with any of these variations, you can change up things like hand spacing, hand position, or whether you're doing a 3-point or even a 2-point push-up to increase stabilizer activation. But we're gonna do a side-to-side push-up right now because it's one of my favorites. Another one of my favorites is an exercise ball push-up, but not a lot of people have those at home. No matter what, whether you have a med ball, a kettlebell, or a stack of books, you can do this variation. You don't even have to have this, but this is just gonna increase the stabilizer activation. So I'm gonna do the next variation on here. So key thing to keep in mind here, this is gonna move around, guys, so make sure you're safe when you're doing this and make sure that you have the strength to do this properly. You don't wanna eat shit on this and you don't wanna hurt yourself on this. Remember, injured athletes can't get stronger. Now, essentially, while I'm doing this, I'm gonna start myself in a push-up position, and I'm basically kind of tossing myself over to the other side and doing a push-up on that side. My feet are more or less going to stay in the same place. If they move around a little bit, that's okay, but you're not thinking about the feet moving around, you're just thinking about your torso moving side to side as you go through. Great exercise to activate the stabilizers. Lots of different ways to do this, guys. If you want, you don't even have to have the ball. You can do it on one leg. You can do all sorts of different variations. But key thing to keep in mind, variations are going to help you to activate more stabilizers. Get creative with them, but be safe. All right, guys, point number 6 is time under tension. Now, time under tension is something obviously we do with pretty much any variation, but push-up variations are gonna allow you, again, maximum amount of time under tension because you can do so many different fun things with them. Now, what is time under tension? What does it mean? Why is it important? Time under tension is a measure of mechanical tension, so the amount of tension that we have on the muscles over a certain period of time. Okay, so it's not just about how much weight, but how long that we're holding that muscle under tension. Now, as a general rule, a lot of times if you're trying to build muscle and you're in the hypertrophy rep ranges, which oftentimes is gonna be 8 to 15 reps, you wanna aim to have sets that last anywhere from 40 to 60 seconds. You can go a little bit longer than this, you can go a little bit shorter than this, but if you breach too far on one end or the other, you're not necessarily gonna get the hypertrophy results that you're looking for. So the muscle gain that you're looking for is typically gonna fall within that span. Now, there's lots of different ways to do this with push-ups, obviously. You can do push-ups slow, you can do those mechanical drop sets. But what I really like to do here, one of the things I really like about push-ups is increasing the range of motion by elevating my hands. Now, you can do this with books, you can do this with steps. You can do this with benches. You can do this with kettlebells, anything you want. I like to use kettlebells just because it gives me a bit of a handle. And to some degree, it's gonna provide me a little bit more of that stabilizer activation because I gotta make sure these things don't flip out on me as I'm going down through my rep. Now, what I wanna do is go through a nice full range of motion under control, so nice and slow, eccentric. And because I'm getting a full range of motion, a big stretch at the bottom, I'm gonna pause. So when I pause at the full stretch of a movement, what I do is I take away the stretch reflex. Now we're gonna talk about the stretch reflex or the stretch shortening cycle as a point today, but all you need to know is that we have an elastic recoil type effect in our muscles. And if we come down super fast, we can tap into that and it makes the concentric phase easier. Now that can be very good, but sometimes, it's good to build strength at the end range of a movement too. So taking that away allows us to add more time under tension. We can build range of motion if we do it safely, and then we can build unbelievable amounts of strength by holding that end range and building strength out of that pocket position without using momentum. So that's what I'm gonna do here. I would probably set a timer if I'm doing this for about 40 seconds. I'm gonna do anywhere from a 2 to 5 second pause at the bottom of each rep, and then I'm gonna make a point to listen to that timer. I wanna get at least 40 seconds time under tension out of this, anywhere up to 60, so I can do more if I want. You can change the spacing of these if you want. They can be more narrow, they can be more wide. More wide will hit a little bit more pec. I'm holding 5 seconds in the bottom of these guys. This is killing my pecs. At the end of the day, just make sure they don't slip out on you. And if you have a hard time stabilizing them like this, you can put your hands here as well. Okay, guys? Again, end range strength, super important. Use these variations to build strength in that full range of motion. Oh, get a couple bonus seconds out of this. And there you have it, guys. Time under tension, a great way to add time under tension and range of motion and build end range strength too. So give that one a shot. You're gonna love it. It's one of my all-time favorite push-up variations. The last point here is that, this is one of my favorite points personally, is that push-ups are a great way to develop what's called the stretch shortening cycle. So the last thing I was talking about there was that elastic capacity that we have to our muscles. Now, we do have an elastic component to the muscles. It also has to do with the tendons, the fascia, all that stuff. I'm not gonna get super duper technical, but essentially, if you think about an elastic, what happens when you stretch the elastic and you let it go? It fires back. The more stretch you put on it, the farther it's gonna fire. Now, we can only stretch so far, but we do have a capacity to store energy in the muscle in that lengthened position. And that's gonna depend upon how fast we drop into that position, how far we can go into that position, how strong the tendons are, how much experience we have with this technique. So I wanna make sure that you guys know right off the hop, this is a more advanced technique. This is not something that you wanna just start doing immediately until you build strength and some of those other techniques that I put on before. But what I'm gonna do essentially here is in the bottom of the motion, as I come down, I'm gonna come down quickly, I'm gonna drive up fast. So I'm thinking about a fast, explosive movement. It's not plyometric yet. I'm not gonna explode off of the ground. I'm gonna put just enough power into it. I'm thinking like sudden violence. So I'm switching directions hard. I'm exploding for a split second. I'm almost gonna coast up to my lockout position and then just start falling back down. And then I'm gonna, same thing, I'm just gonna explode momentarily, I'm gonna catch that, explode back up. Now, what's the point of this? What's the benefit? Again, with all these different techniques, there's benefits in a number of different ways. Think about like your overall capacity to do different types of methods as a bunch of different buckets, all right? Each one of these buckets, as they become more and more full, they give you more and more overall total athleticism. If you've got one bucket that's over full, so let's say you're super flexible, but you don't have a ton of strength, taking a bunch of time to develop flexibility when you're not strong, overfilling that bucket is not gonna help. So this stretch shortening cycle will build athletic capacity, strength, power, all of that fun stuff. And again, when you're doing this properly, you can probably get some high reps. You're gonna get a lot of lactate acid accumulation in your pecs, and that's gonna help for muscular development as well. So I want you to think about this almost like a slingshot or an elastic band. I'm gonna explode up once I hit the bottom. I'm just punching in a high magnitude of power for a split second so I can coast up. I'm gonna fall back down and then I'm gonna repeat. It's very similar to a plyometric push-up, but what I'm doing here over time is something different. So am I building explosive power? Yes. Am I looking to drive all the way through as hard as possible like I did with that plyometric push-up? No, because what I'm trying to do here is build up some endurance-based capacity for me to tap in to that elasticity and that energy storage component of the tendons, okay? After doing that for a while, what happens is I build up an enormous amount of endurance for a lot of these bodyweight exercises. exercises. So my personal best over time was 144 push-ups consecutively. At one point I did 60 consecutive one-arm push-ups. And that's not to be a pat on the back for me, but that's more to show that this type of training can build up unbelievable amounts of strength and power with these bodyweight exercises when you learn how to tap into that stretch shortening cycle. Okay, same thing with dips, all that kind of fun stuff. So that's it for that point as well. That variation you can be used in combination with the other ones too. So I could do the same type of thing as I'm doing a side-to-side push-up. I could do the same type of thing for different variations. So keep that in mind. It's more of a concept than something that's going to be directed specifically towards push-ups, but an awesome concept, and it will generate tons of size and power for you if you apply it properly. And there you have it, guys. That is the 7 reasons why the push-up is one of the greatest muscle building exercises of all time. There are a lot more reasons, if I'm being honest, and there's a ton more variations, which is one of the things that make the push-up so great. So a quick recap here is that we want to remember that the push-up is one of the kings of compound exercises. We're going to hit a ton of different muscle groups. We're not just hitting chest, but we're hitting shoulders, triceps, forearms, core, lats, serratus, quads if you do it right, glutes if you do it right. You're going to hit a ton of different muscle groups. We got lots of time under tension through different variations. So we can do drop sets, we can do plyometric stuff, so we can work the stretch shortening cycle, we can build the capacity of our body to activate more motor units. There's a ton of benefits here, guys. If you activate more motor units, you're gonna be more powerful. If you're more powerful, you can move more weight, you're gonna get bigger faster. Bottom line, push-ups are one of the greatest muscle building exercises of all time. Don't forget it. All right, guys, now listen, if you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe. If you have any comments, if you can think of anything that I missed, please enter that into the comment section down below. I love interacting with you guys. And outside of that, make sure to continue to train hard and stay strong. Oh, God. Yeah. All right, guys, thank you for joining us for another Blue Star Nutraceuticals training video. And remember, if you want to continue to build muscle and burn fat, we've got awesome content here and here. Hit the subscribe button right here. I promise 2 videos every single week that'll help you reach your muscle building goals. We're not just a YouTube channel, we also make award-winning supplements. So no matter what your goal, we've got the supplement for you. So check us out at bluestarnutraceuticals.com.